Alright guys, trade rumor time. This week in the NHL, there's definitely been a lot of trade rumors heating up. Now that we're way past, or I guess well past the quarter mark within this 2019-2020 season, most teams have a much better idea of how their team is shaping out, whether they can actually make a playoff push or perhaps they trade some veterans out to kind of rebuild their team. Because for the many teams who made a lot of changes this past offseason, they either rely on internal development or they're relying on these new pieces, so they never truly understand, what type of team they have until, of course, they start playing. So with that being said, now that we have some games under our belts, don't be surprised if we finally start seeing some more trades coming down in the pipeline. So buckle up, we've got some big rumors to go over. To start, we have probably one of the most popular trade rumors kind of heating up at the moment, Ghostisbehere to the Montreal Canadiens. Now, it's no secret that the Canadiens and Marc Bergevin have been seeking out, that higher end left-handed defenseman for quite some time now. Now, there definitely are some other guys on the market that are currently being shopped around. Other trade rumors like Pietrangelo or Peter Angelo or even like Ristolainen, but both of those guys are right-handed defensemen. And again, the Montreal Canadiens are putting emphasis on those left-handed defensemen. Or I guess another example is a guy like Alec Martinez from the LA Kings. But out of all the defensemen currently in the trade market, I do feel as if Ghostisbehere could be that perfect fit. Ghost has started the 2019-2020 season very, poorly compared to his previous standards. With only 9 points in 25 games this season as an offensive defenseman, this production is kind of a mere shadow of what Ghostisbehere is capable of. Ghostisbehere is a great offensive-minded defenseman who has, under the right circumstance, he can definitely put up north of 60 points, which is definitely great. And I guess the real question is, perhaps Philly, they're willing to trade Ghost, but for what? He is really underperforming. He had a down year last season too, with only 37 points in 78 games. And the season before that, he had his career high 65 points in 78 games, which is obviously very impressive. And this season, he's even been healthy scratch. So that's definitely very, very interesting. He went from having a 65-point season as a defenseman, and this season he's healthy scratched. And for the Flyers, it's definitely way more of an easier decision when they have a guy like Ivan Provorov, who's really looking like a top-end defenseman within that whole NHL. So giving up another left-handed defenseman in Ghostisbehere isn't as crazy as it seems when you look at it compared to a couple years ago. Not to mention the Montreal Canadiens just drafted Cam York, another left-handed defenseman, so again, it only adds to it. But what does Montreal have to give up? The Canadiens, in my opinion, need scoring. The recent downward spiral has really pointed towards better defense and better scoring. And if Ghost is able to come in, really gain some momentum, and strive towards the form that he was really displaying a couple years ago, this would automatically help Montreal's defensive situation and their scoring situation. However, who would the Montreal Canadiens trade? When I look at the Flyers' current roster, I would think that they would probably want some type of defenseman back, just based on the current lineup. Again, they do have a guy like Cam York who will be ready in a couple years, but Cam York won't be ready for a couple years, so they want a current defenseman to kind of fill in Ghostisbehere's role. Now, they do definitely have some internal guys, but I would think they'd want to go get another roster defenseman, or perhaps they'd trade another team for another type of roster defenseman. But for Montreal, perhaps they get some picks, some type of forward. The Flyers have been building out a really good future forward core, so it'd be really interesting to see what they'd actually want for a guy like Ghostisbehere. Next rumor, Taylor Hall. Now, Taylor Hall has been at the forefront of the rumor mill, especially since that it has been reported that Ray Shero and the Devils are open to trade offers. Now, to be honest, this could really mean anything. Brian Burke once famously said that a GM is open to any trade offers, on any single player. Of course, if you receive 10 first-round picks for anyone, you take the deal. However, this is definitely a lot more traction than what we saw, I guess, at the start of the season or even a couple weeks ago. The whole Taylor Hall trade speculation really started to gain momentum when he said he wanted to be on a winning team. However, it definitely did cool down when the Devils made some huge offseason acquisitions in acquiring guys like Gusev, Subban, and then drafting Jack Hughes. However, the Devils are currently at the bottom of the standings. They're currently 30th out of all 31 teams, so second last place. And Taylor Hall is looking into free agency with dollar signs in his eyes because he has the ability to basically go to any single team in the whole NHL. Now, Taylor Hall was also quoted the fact that he is single, he has no kids, and he has no reason to be tied down to a single city, which further adds to this rumor. I'm not saying he doesn't want to be in New Jersey, but the fact that he has no, ties to New Jersey definitely doesn't help Ray Shero's case in keeping him. Now, I would be very surprised if Taylor Hall is not dealt by this trade deadline. Unless Shero is basically, willing to offer a max contract to a guy like Taylor Hall, or something we can't see behind the scenes, I just can't see it. But at least Ray Shero does have some time to make the right decision. If the Devils do remain at the bottom of the league, they could get some good building block pieces in return for Taylor Hall. They'd get a good premium for Taylor Hall. So definitely, it's not the worst situation if they do have to trade create some type of trade here because Taylor Hall is going to have a buttload of trade value. Draft picks, high-end prospects, possible goaltending, even though the market's kind of thin on possible goaltenders at the moment, or even roster players. Again, the Devils would receive a very nice premium for a guy like Taylor Hall. The Colorado Avalanche, the Montreal Canadiens, the Oilers, and the Blues are currently some of the main potential trade partners, and I guess the teams that we're already pointing towards at the moment. To start with the Oilers would be a pretty awesome fit for Taylor Hall. The irony of this trade, combined with how much sense it would actually make, is actually it's pretty hilarious. However, given Edmonton's current roster situation, I find it very hard to imagine. I mean, they do have the assets. They could somehow piece together some type of package that would, possibly intrigue Ray Shiro, perhaps trading some prospects like Yamamoto, Puljujarvi, first-round picks in 2020. They might just be able to package some type of deal that would, get Taylor Hall. However, their current cap situation is why I find it very hard to believe. It just really isn't possible. Unless they were able to trade guys like James Neal, Sam Gagner, and some other type of cap dumps, they just have no cap space at the moment. They have over $4 million in buyout penalties, and they're rightfully so, but they're paying guys like McDavid and Draisaitl humongous bucks. Rightfully so, of course, but that just means if you're going to be paying guys like that much money, you're going to be taking away from other parts of the roster. And it's just not possible, and I just can't see it happening unless it's just a rental play. And I don't really think that makes any sense for the Edmonton Oilers, who aren't really necessarily... They're definitely a playoff team this year. They've really proven it. I wouldn't consider them a top-end contender, especially when it comes to the playoffs when depth scoring means so much more. I don't see why they'd do this as a rental move. I can't see it happening. And unless the Edmonton Oilers made some huge moves, again, like dealing some big cap dumps like James Neal, it's just not possible. Next team, the Colorado Avalanche, another team who is very interested in a guy like Taylor Hall. With superstars like McKinnon, Makar, Rantanen, Landeskog, it would be insane if they were somehow able to add a guy like Hall to the mix. And the crazy thing is, with some good asset management, it is definitely possible in terms of cap situation. With a guy like McKinnon, an extremely team-friendly deal at $6.3 million, I mean, at the time, it was a fair deal, but when you consider that a guy like McKinnon's only making $6.3 million, and a guy like Mitch Marner is making nearly $11 million, that's just insane. McKinnon is, in my opinion, a top 3 player in the league at the moment. Maybe McKinnon, McDavid, and Pasternak, and the Avalanche have no, terrible overpayment contracts on their team at the moment. Really good job, Joe Sakic. The Avs would definitely be able to manage a reasonable Hall extension. And when you look at the Colorado Avalanche and imagine how good they are now, they're winning games in buttloads even before Rantanen came back, and they're missing their, 2 of their 3 best players. Just imagine how good the Avalanche would be with a guy like Taylor Hall. And if I was Joe Sakic, I would think it would make so much sense to go for someone like Hall, who would make, the Avs a very serious cup contender. Especially since they already are the real deal. Now imagine again, if Taylor Hall was part of that mix, they would just be insane. Now surely they'd have to give up high-end draft picks, prospects, and perhaps, when I think of the Avalanche, a roster player like Tyson Jost, who has good upside still, but isn't fully turning out for the Avalanche, and perhaps a defenseman. Now, I've been hearing a lot of rumors involving Bowen Byram, the previous fourth overall pick from the 2019 NHL draft, but I just can't see it. I don't think it really makes sense to give a guy like, Bowen Byram, who really is part of their whole defensive core of the future. I don't think that'd be worth it. Maybe it is. That's a bit tough to say. But if the Devils would be willing to take on a package of options like, multiple first-round picks, Tyson Jost, some roster players, it definitely could be possible. What do you guys think about the Avalanche acquiring a guy like Taylor Hall? That would just be insane. Next, we have the Montreal Canadiens, who are definitely a team who are very interested in Taylor Hall, and they are also another team that makes a lot of sense. They are in need of someone like Taylor Hall who will help solidify their top 6 and, really add that pure scoring dynamic to the roster. And they also do have some salary cap to make it possible. However, they would have to trade some contracts to make this happen, and Max Domi's contract expires after the season. Max Domi is currently only making $3.1 million, and you'd have to imagine that, his contract for this upcoming season will be at least minimum $6-7 million, at least minimum. I would imagine, given the current market, at least $7 million. So unless Bergevin can make some crazy moves, it's very unlikely for the Habs, unfortunately. And lastly, we have the St. Louis Blues. Now, the Blues are, of course, the defending Stanley Cup champions, and their number 1 goal scorer, and Tarasenko, is injured, I believe, for the remainder of the season, and they really want a replacement to, push towards another cup once again. Because St. Louis is still a great team, a contending team. However, given their current cap situation, unless they traded a guy like their captain, Pietrangelo, however you want to say it, no one really understands it, who is a part of and he's also been a big part of this whole rumor mill. Hall would again have to be a rental player for the Blues. And personally, I can't really see Hall as a rental player. You know, any team that is going to want Hall, they're going to want him long term. He's way too costly in my opinion as a rental, and unless you're a team who knows that Hall will guarantee you a Stanley Cup, it's just not worth it. Last year we saw Matt Duchene getting traded in a kind of a similar circumstance from the Ottawa Senators to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and they only had to give up, a first round pick and some extra change, or I guess at the time was considered just some extra change for a top 6 forward, and that was definitely worth it. However, for a guy like Taylor Hall, he's definitely a step above, in my opinion, Matt Duchene, and this would be way too much to pay for a rental guy, in my opinion. But what do you guys think? The only realistic team I can see here is probably the Colorado Avalanche in terms of the current cap situation, the current pieces they have at the moment, and the fact that Hall really, truly could push them into winning a Stanley Cup. But anyways, guys, those are just some of the rumors of the day. Let me know what you guys think down below. See you guys later.